Good evening. I'm Brent Glass, Executive Director of the Sing Sing Prison Museum. The mission of the museum is to tell the complex and compelling 200-year history of Sing Sing Prison, one of the most famous prisons in American history. And our mission is also to reimagine criminal justice in America today and to inspire our visitors to take action to build a better society. We are governed by a very dedicated board of directors, board of trustees, and a very committed and productive staff. This year, in response to the impact of the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter protests, we created a webinar series, Justice Talks. And that series has included webinars on policing, capital punishment, and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on prisons in America. I want to recognize two of our staff members, Victoria Gonzalez and Nicole Hamilton, who have produced this program tonight and provide technical support, and also the Osborne Association, our partner organization. The Osborne Association, founded in the 1930s, named for Thomas Mott Osborne, a leader in criminal justice more than 100 years ago. Tonight's program is Justice Talks, Families Staying Connected, an intimate look at prison visits and the families who depend on them. The facilitator tonight is Roneen Simmons Bartley, an educator and a member of the Sing Sing Prison Museum Board of Trustees. And we're very grateful to Roneen for her leadership in creating this program tonight. Roneen suggested that we start the program with the following video, and she will talk about it afterwards. Thank you. Enjoy tonight's program, and you can participate by asking questions if you have any by clicking the question button on your Zoom screen. Thank you.
Hey everyone, this is Glenn from Belief in Fatherhood, a YouTube channel where I tell honest stories about the ins and outs of being a dad. My wife Yvette and I have 3 kids and 1 on the way. And this Father's Day, like every day, I'll hang out with my kids, laugh with them, play with them, love them, surrounded by absolute joy. But sadly, millions of kids across America will not be able to share these moments with their fathers because their fathers are incarcerated. For far too many kids in this country, growing up with an incarcerated father has a life-lasting effect on their development. To end the suffering of these children and their fathers, we must end this system of mass incarceration and create communities full of love and opportunity. I am honored to present on Father's Day these love letters from children to incarcerated fathers. Happy Father's Day.
I wasn't present for your birth in the delivery room and miss being one of the first human beings your newly opened eyes landed on. Those and so many other memories were never created.
Those are agonizing. You know, I always wished I was there to improve their lives. I can't get back those years, so I'm not gonna keep looking backwards. I wanna look onward.
It's about us building that bond and making it stronger and just putting in that effort to be in your children's lives is what my goals are as a father.
Dear Dad.
Hi, Dad.
I hope this letter finds you in good spirits.
It's been 10 years since you've been gone. I am so excited to know that you will be home this year.
I was just looking at a picture of us on Grandma's fridge. I can remember like it was yesterday.
What I miss most about you is your hugs and your kisses.
When you were inside, I felt like a part with me was missing. That part that was missing was you. Plus, it was a bit boring without you. It hurts not to be able to hug you or talk to you all the time I want.
Although we talk on the phone almost every day, I didn't realize how much I actually need you physically.
27 years is a long time not to have you right next to me, to hug me when you come home from work, or to wipe my tears away when somebody breaks my heart.
I wish you a happy Father's Day. I want you to enjoy this day. and think about how much we love you.
Happy Father's Day. I love you, Dad.
Happy Father's Day, Dad. I love you.
Happy Father's Day. Love, Gregory.
I love you, Dad. Happy Father's Day. Love, Erica.
I want you in my life for the rest of the time. I never want you to leave me again.
Happy Father's Day.
You're the most amazing father, and you have made my life complete. Thank you for being you. Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day. I love you, Dad.
A little tearjerker, huh, everybody? I'm so sorry. Good evening, everyone, and thank you again for joining us for this installment of Justice Talks, Family Staying Connected. I want to take us back to the video that you saw by saying, we chose this video, even though it isn't anywhere near Father's Day, to put real faces of children who have nothing but genuine love for their fathers, despite being apart. Unfortunately, once someone is incarcerated, visits are scarce to none. Statistics show that incarcerated people receive a little more than 2 visits a year. In 1993, 17 states had conjugal visitation programs, but now only 4 states have them, including New York. 2 of our goals to achieve Sing Sing Prison Museum's mission is to desensationalize and humanize the stories of prison impacted and listen to and uplift those living the experience daily. We hear about the hardships of incarceration as a whole, which is something that should be continued in order to bring about change. When it comes to criminal justice, though, it is rare that you hear conversation surrounding the positive impact of prison visits, like reducing recidivism, staying out of trouble while in prison, redemption, a smoother reentry process, and of course, building and maintaining strong relationships. Organizations that offer programs are helpful to surviving prison, and so are visits. I know because receiving consistent visits played a significant role in my husband, Lawrence Bartley's life inside and outside of prison. But he is not the exception. There are many families that Lawrence and I know who have their own visiting success story. Cecily and Kenyatta Hughes, Merva and Mark Both Swain, Tanisha and Mark Coleman, Tanja and Pritla Grady, and Michelle and Jermaine Archer. Welcome home, Jermaine. Your stories are still to come. With all that said, don't get me wrong, you will hear about some of the obstacles that our panelists face, because the reality is that it's rough, and at times it really does take a mental toll on families. But you know what? We persevere because we understand the importance of staying connected. And by the end of this webinar, we hope you will too. I would now like to introduce the people I will converse with tonight. Most of them you saw in the pictures we showed you earlier, all who have some connection with prison visitation. Lorraine N. Messiah, a registered municipal registrar and clerk in the state of New Jersey, helped me to Kassan S. Messiah Sr. for 35 years and legally married for 26 of those years. Kassan is currently housed in Sing Sing Correctional Facility. Kassan and Lorraine raised 3 children, ages 28, 26, and 17 during his incarceration. The 2 eldest are college graduates and professionals contributing to society. As a valorous woman with strength of soul, Lorraine continues to honor her husband and family. They have been successful under some of the most difficult of circumstances, but she is forever grateful. Taekwon L. Coleman, son of Mark Coleman, who served 19.5 years in prison, is a proud alumnus of the University at Albany SUNY, who is devoted to solving the problems faced by socially marginalized and economically disadvantaged communities. He is currently a master's candidate at the New School, studying urban policy and a legislative staffer at the New York State Senate. Jennifer Fico served 17 years and 6 months of an 18-year to life sentence. She is the founding board member of Imani Safe House, named after her daughter, Imani Nyaja Fico, who visited her frequently during their incarceration. Jennifer is employed by Bellevue Hospital and COVID-19 Corp. She is currently in her last semester at Marymount Manhattan College, seeking her bachelor's degree. And last but not least, the infamous Elizabeth Gaines, president and CEO of Osborne Association, a New York nonprofit criminal justice organization. The Osborne Association serves 12,000 plus individuals a year in New York City, Newburgh, and Buffalo, 30 state prisons, and Rikers Island, with programs that include family, educational, employment, treatment, and housing services. Liz was recognized as Obama's White House Champion of Change for Children of Incarcerated Parents. She received her BA and JD from Syracuse University and began her career in the aftermath of the 1971 Attica Rebellion as a criminal defense and prisoners' rights lawyer. So as you can see, we have an amazing panel. We are going to get started with the questions right now, but I just want to mention to everybody watching that you can ask questions using the Q&A button, and we will answer those questions at the end of the session. Okay, so Lorraine, I'm going to start with you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us. I am so happy that you are able to join us. So the first question that I want to ask you, Lorraine, is given the complexities of married life, how are you able to provide a sense of normalcy for you and your husband? Wait a minute, Lorraine, you're muted. There you go. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
All right, everyone, thank you for having me. And that is a very big question. Sense of normalcy, I don't know if I could ever make anything normal. What I do is I adapt to the situation that I'm currently in. Our normalcy was going up on weekly visits to see my husband. My normalcy is including him with every step and aspect of raising our children, whether it's from taking phone calls and speaking with the teachers, scheduling the calls around the times that I know that he would have his phone time, sending report cards on a quarterly basis, going over budgets on our weekly visits. As normal as I could make it for him without putting the burden on him of not being able to be the man that's there to protect his family is the normalcy that I create. After being incarcerated for over 26 years, it's just really difficult for a man being removed from home, not understanding or having the ability to protect his family. But systemically, this is how things have been set up for the family of color, unfortunately. And me personally, I just felt that I needed to break that cycle. And in doing so, I refused to allow those walls to divide us. So I kept him in tune with everything and every aspect of our home life.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Taekwon, so when I first started visiting Lawrence, it was a wonderful thing. I love going to visit my husband every weekend, but I never ever I never ever told anybody at work that I had an incarcerated husband. I just want to know, is Taekwon here? Because I don't see him here. But if you are here, Taekwon, I want to ask you if you can relate to this as a son visiting his dad. And if you did, if you can relate to this, what could have made it better for you to cope? Is he here? Is Taekwon here or no? He's not here?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So I'd say it's kind of hard. I don't think anyone knew. I think I had very few friends that I would tell. It was a closely guarded secret. And I don't know. I think recently for CS Support Us Month, I posted a picture on Instagram, and that was the first time I told everyone. And I'm 24, and I think I still deal with the residual effects of it, where it's like I have to be perfect, I have to be great, I can't deviate from this path that I set. And I think unfortunately, and I can't speak for all children of incarcerated parents, but I think there's a certain path you have in mind, and like if anytime you deviate from that path, it's a very it's a moment of dissonance. I don't know. I don't know if there was anything I could have done that would have made it better. I think I've since met teachers who are also family members of people incarcerated, and they've come to me and been like, wow, I want to tell my students this, but I'm not sure how to do that. And and it's something that I think if I would have had a teacher tell me hey, I know, and I know what it's like, and I think that might have made it easier. But even then, I don't know. I think it still would have been a offsetting moment.
Okay, I definitely can relate to that because as a teacher, as a dean, I used to pull the kids aside that were so-called the label kids, and I used to tell them, look, I go upstate every weekend, and you better not, end up there. And that connection was made because some of them, or many of them, had incarcerated parents. So I appreciate that. Jen, I hope you can hear me. I know you're having some internet issues, but I wanted to ask you, how did receiving visits affect you as an incarcerated mother? And I want you to describe those precious moments. All right, I know that Jen is having some issues, so I'm gonna just go to Liz, okay? And we'll get back to Jen. Liz, what role does Osborne play when it comes to prison visits?
Well, not enough probably, but Family Works, which you've seen at Sing Sing, is actually in 8 prisons, but it's, I started that 35 years ago, actually. And at the time, it was the first comprehensive program for incarcerated fathers in a state prison. I had seen the programs. I knew when I first came to Osborne in 1984, I had met the nuns that did the work at Bedford Hills, and I saw that they had it, but I'm kind of a daddy's girl. So I was like, well, wait a minute, how come we don't have anything for the fathers that should be the same? And because I had previously been a lawyer at Prisoners Legal Services, I knew people in corrections, including this deputy commissioner that I had sued several times. And I said, you're a father. Don't you think fathers are important? And what was he going to say? No. But I didn't want to do just the parenting program. I thought if we're going to do this, it has to include the whole family. And I wanted it to be in the visiting room. And at that time, they had these Sesame Street rooms where, they would push kids over there to watch television or, away from the visit. But I wanted something in which we only would have the child there if the dad was in there also, and to make it, just a better place. So you're never going to make it perfect. I remember when we first opened that visiting room, family center in Sing Sing, at first they were like, why do you want to make it so nice? Kids are going to want to go to prison if you give them a nice place to go. This is a terrible idea. So I said, well, let's just go with it for a minute. And then about 6 weeks after it opened, our staff couldn't go in for some reason. And I got a call from the watch commander saying, Liz, these kids are running all over the visiting room. Isn't somebody going to come here and open up the family center? And I was like, well, that was a switch. So every time we had to open up another prison, I took that Sing Sing sergeant, sent him there so he could explain why it was better for everybody to have this space. And the other thing is we insisted is that the incarcerated men would make the best caregivers, that we would, we needed a civilian there, but I felt really strongly that we would not do this. One, if the dads couldn't come into the room, if it wasn't a family visit, and two, if we could not have what they call inmate caregivers who were trained and could make it more trusting for people. So we've done the parenting. My daughter Imani started participating in the course, I don't know, 25 years ago. But again, it's only in 8 prisons. We also have 16 hospitality centers where we probably greet 80,000 people a year. But for us, always at Osborne, families come first.
Okay, thank you. I just want you to know, you probably hear it often, but I'm just going to say it again. We've benefited tremendously from that family center. Lauren worked in the family center. Mark Coleman, Taekwon's dad, worked in the family center. Both my children learned how to walk in the family center. So we really thank you for that. And Osborne is doing great work. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to Lorraine because Jen appears to still be having problems. If Jen doesn't get back on, I'll tell a little bit of her story because it's an amazing one. So Lorraine, okay, so for as long as I've known you, you've been a beautiful, career-focused woman. So I'm gonna ask the question that a lot of people just wanna know. How and why do you stay devoted to your husband?
He's my soulmate. Very simple. We grew up together as children. We were friends as children. He is my best friend. Well, it's really simple. I mean, what else can I say?
It's quite simple.
Right.
I totally get it. Do you feel,
I'm gonna cry.
How have you coped with it? I saw you tear up when we were showing the Father's Day video, and you got me. I had to make sure that my tissue was close to me because, I only know a piece of your struggle. I only did it for, I think, 13 and a half years, Right. I did not do it anywhere close to as long as you did. And I just want to know, this is not in one of my scripted questions. What motivates you? Is it your faith? Is it because you're soulmates? What keeps you going every day to keep the strong bond? Because when anyone sees you two, it's obvious that, you're definitely in love. It's a wonderful family. Mm-hmm. What is your motivation? I just want to know what keeps you going. How do you cope? When you leave that, I know I'm asking a lot of questions at once.
Yes, you are.
Once you leave that visiting room though, right? This is the question. Once you leave that visiting room, what keeps you going until you get there again?
Knowing that my husband is at ease, knowing that he's comfortable, knowing that I can maintain our household and our children, knowing that I've given him a sense of comfort and that I'm able to take care of our family. But what keeps me going and motivating me as far as my family is concerned is just that. It is my family. Once you've removed my husband from our home, within my faith with my mother, who's since passed away. And I said, I'm going to break the cycle. My son is never going to enter anyone's walls. So what keeps me going is, you know, he's been taken away from us. But if I removed the family from him as well, I just felt like that would be an injustice, because although the walls separate us, we should not be separated as a family unit, because society does that enough. And it's very important to have that father figure within the family dynamic, because although I'm a matriarch and I have had a professional career and I can handle the responsibility of taking care of our family, I cannot raise a man. And it's very difficult as a woman to raise a woman that's focused and, you know, understands her position in life. You know, as a woman of color, you know, unfortunately, there are so many battles that we fight, and we have to be strong in order to raise our families. But we also need to understand that our husbands should be there to be our providers and our protectors. And I don't want my daughters, for instance, to feel as if that's their responsibility. Although I had to do it, it was because I was forced to do it. But I want them to understand that the man that they're with needs to be their protector. And my husband wants to be there to be our protectors. The safest I feel is when I am actually on a visit, you know, for the trailers, the family visit. I think that is the soundest sleep that I ever receive, because I don't feel anymore like I have to protect the family. I can hear a pin drop in our home. And the kids tell me all the time, you hear everything. It's because I'm always on guard. But when I'm with my husband or during those trailers, I sleep soundly, and he allows me to. And I play my position at that point. I step back and I become mom, and I allow him to be dad. He goes over the grades. He goes over what their desires are. What courses are you taking in college? How are you accomplishing this? What are we doing? You know, what sports are you getting involved in? So it's keeping that family dynamic together. And that's what drives me, because although we're separated, it does not mean that we need to be removed from one another. And fortunately, with all the programs offered by New York State, keeping the families together, it's afforded me that opportunity to take advantage between the weekly visits, the festivals and so forth, whatever program you have for the fathers and children, the family room, for instance. My children also learned to walk in the family room. He would pull their teeth in the family room, because I am not the tooth fairy. I just could never pull a tooth. So they would actually wait until they got into the visit and, you know, Dad, I have two teeth loose and mommy won't pull them. And he would pull their teeth. You know, that was a going thing. So it's just very, very important. But knowing that I give him a sense of comfort that we're good and that he has that connection with his family keeps me motivated.
That's right. Well said. I can't say it any better than that. Jen, you're back. So the question that I have for you is, how did receiving this affect you as an incarcerated mother? You're echoing, I don't know why. How did it affect you as an incarcerated mother? And if you can describe those precious moments for us. You're muted, I think. Unmute yourself. There you go.
As an incarcerated mother?
Yes.
To tell you what it was like with visitation?
Yeah, I want to know how it affected you. How did those visits affect you? And I want you to describe some of those.
My question not.
I'm sorry. Say that again, Jen. Let's try it one more time.
My connection is is breaking up.
All right. So listen, let me just, I'm going to try to go out of order a little bit, just to try to hear a little bit of your story. So your daughter Imani used to visit you, correct? Well, both your daughters, but Imani was one of the, can you tell us a little bit about Imani and why going back to those precious moments mean a lot to you today?
Well, those are the moments that I have left of her. So those memories are all that I have left of her right now. That relationship is why I miss her so much. So when I came out, I did get to spend the last few months of her life with her. But she was 24, she passed, and yeah, the visitation. So, I mean, it kept both of us going. So she was my motivation to continue and get out early and be so well behaved and do like change my life and just want to do good and do right. So she was my motivation for that.
Thank you. Hold on. Just try to hang in there, okay? Because I have some more questions for you. I'm gonna go to Taekwon, all right? And the question for you is the same that I posed to Jen. Walk us through one of the most memorable moments with your dad. You're muted. Unmute yourself. Thank you.
One of the most I would say it would have to be one of the trailers. I remember I didn't want to do something. Like I genuinely didn't want to do it, and he was like, "You have to do this, that, and the third." And I didn't want to do it because I didn't want him telling me what to do. I was about 10, and I thought I was as grown as could be. And I remember like I had to bring the food in, and the moment I brought the food in, it all fell on the floor. And I remember like the panic, like they're gonna think I did this on purpose because I didn't want to bring the food in. I think that like if I'm being totally honest and totally transparent, I think that there are certain things that like I didn't intentionally like block out, but like once he came home, that was a part of my life that like I didn't think about. So like there are bits and pieces, like it's my entire youth, but there are bits and pieces that like I was like, all right, I'm gonna remember what I did in school that year, but I have no memory about the visit. And I think that was like its own defense mechanism, I guess. But if I had to say anything, the most memorable would be the me dropping all of the food on the floor and them being very upset.
Okay, that's a good one. Liz, can you identify with any of these stories? And did your experience influence the shape of Osborne's mission or any of its programs?
Well, I mean, all the family works came out of my experience right around that same time. When I first came to Osborne, actually, my kids were, I don't know, 1 and 5, 2 and 6, and their dad was on the 10 most wanted list, and then he was captured shortly after I started. And but he was incarcerated in Virginia. Mm-hmm. And we'd been separated, but I was like, well, okay, he was there when we made these kids. You can be a dad from anywhere. I was determined to keep them connected, but it was 500-mile drive each way, maybe 450. And Virginia there's no trailers, there's nothing, but I kind of felt like even if I couldn't do this for my kids, my way of dealing with it was to see where I was in New York, maybe I could do something. Because they also grew up in visiting rooms, but I also really wanted their dad to help me, and he really did, think about what would go into a parenting class, because it wasn't just the family center, that was a place for the men to practice. Mm-hmm. So he and I had to come up with a plan, and we made a covenant. Remember, we weren't together, but I said, listen, I will bring your children to visit you. I will include you in all of their important decisions about their education or where we live and all of that. I will give you information about sports so you can win all the betting pools, but you have to remember their birthdays without any help from me. You have to be totally straight and honest with them about why you're here, mm-hmm. and not try to put it on something else, because I want them to know the truth. And you have to come on time to a visit right away, not take your shower after they call you for the visit. because I don't want to sit around the visiting room looking and having my kids wanting to know, why is he here? Who is that? What is that? So we made those rules, and I was privileged to have this great job where I also had a car and also had enough money that I was able to make those visits. But I was determined always to have it. And then for people that took the course, you know, that my daughter Imani was part of it and was able to really be straight with the guys in ways that even I couldn't be, as this, you know, lovely white woman, crazy person, that could really just explain to them straight out, like, don't tell them you're innocent, just be responsible and know, you know, just be able to say what it was like for her. And so yes, I was slightly influenced by my own experience.
You had all of for the audience, you can't see all the panelists at one time, but once she said like he can't be late coming down to the visit to the visiting room, all of the panelists started cracking up because we can all relate in some way. Lorraine, back to you again. So we're in the midst of COVID-19. How has this affected your routine, and what alternatives are you utilizing as a result?
It has actually impacted us tremendously. Unfortunately, the last time I saw my husband was probably mid-October, because things were just a little hectic in that once they closed the visiting room down, I'm gonna say the end of February, beginning of March, I had seen him in January, and because I had a medical procedure, that was the last time I'd seen him until November. It was the first week of November, because when they reopened the visiting room, I was able to go in because he wanted me to wait basically to see how the visitation was going to be handled, what the safeguards were and all the parameters. Well, when I went to see him, there is a new procedure in that they have tables separating you from the inmate. And the tables are probably about 6 to 7 feet long. They're beyond 6 feet long. He sits on one side, you sit across from him. There is no touching, there is no kissing. You can only remove your mask to have a conversation if you're eating. Meanwhile, you have officers walking around without a mask. So it's kind of a moot point in that if the conditions of wearing the mask are there to protect us, you know, it just doesn't occur. So also with the phone calls that are coming in, he gets to call once a week. And during that that period, you know, he tries to get in maybe 2 or 3 times within that day, because the calls have also been reduced to 15 minutes. But most often he only gets about 5 or 10 minutes. And there's an officer saying, hang up, because there's a line of men waiting to call and speak with their families. So it's impacted us tremendously. And you know, there's only 2 visits allowed at a time, in addition to having the long table. So where the entire family would go to visit weekly, only 2 could go. So we alternate the visits. Now that I've relocated to Boston, my eldest daughter has 2 sons. She can never go visit because she has 2 sons. So unless she has someone babysitting, or, you know, their dad picks them up, he's not getting the visitation that he's accustomed to. So we just try and talk, you know, that 1 day a week and make the best of it. But we utilize the JPay email system. You know, I do videos throughout the day. I took videos of the move from New Jersey to Boston. I even took videos of like the U-Haul truck being loaded. Anything that gives him a sense of normalcy and, you know, to let him know that we're still here and how things are moving. Because there's nothing else.
I really feel for you and your family and all of the rest of the families that are going through this at this time.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult.
Jen, if you're still here, I don't know if our listeners got the whole of your story, but your daughter passed away over the summer. So I want to know, how are you continuing Imani's legacy? Unmute. You got to unmute yourself, babe. There you go.
So since my daughter passed away, we started I founded Imani's Safe House. So the goal is to have safe houses that we own and that are for people in the African diaspora who are impacted by the justice system, because there's nothing for us right now. So that's the goal. But right now, what we are doing is sending mail into the women's prison. So there's 3 women's prisons in New York State, and we're sending to all 3 of the prisons mail to open up communication to the women. And we send $10 to each of them, only to encourage them to purchase a stamp, either email or a snail mail stamp, to connect and to communicate. And so since that, we are getting mail back and forth and we are communicating with them. So, and also we're planning to open that up to family and support the families. And we're gonna have like meetings so we could be supportive and figure out what needs to be done. So we're doing that right now. We have a book. So Imani's Safe House, Imani's Safe House Community Connects is the program that we have right now, reaching out to the women incarcerated. Because I'm gonna be honest, the women hold it down. So when women are incarcerated, it's a little bit harder than it is for men, because you see how you women hold it down for your husbands? We the ones that hold it down. So it's harder for, I'm gonna say it's harder for the families. So.
That is very true. And us women, we tell the husbands all the time, if the shoe was on the other foot, honey, I don't think you would be able to do it. Love or no love, it's just not gonna happen. So we know, and they know too. I just wanna wish you luck in your endeavors with Imani Safe House, and it is not going to be easy, but don't you give up, okay? Taekwon, I have 2 more questions for Taekwon and 1 for Liz. So Taekwon, I'm gonna ask you first. So now that your dad is home, right? After spending over 18 years in prison, I want you to talk to us about the dynamic between you two now that you're an adult. How does that work exactly? Unmute.
So I remember when he first came home, I had to be, I had just turned 21. And I remember my mom and dad wanted to like, oh, let's go bowling, or let's go ice skating, or let's go do this, that, and a third. And at 21, I had literally just turned 21 probably 2 months before. So I was like, I'm going out to party with my friends. I'm not doing this. I'm an adult. I'm not hanging out with a 12-year-old and I think 4-month-old at that time. I'm going out. Now I wish I could go out. In hindsight. But I don't know. I think I would say things are fairly well. I think yeah, we get along. I don't see like there being any major issues. But yeah, I think definitely there is we've done a lot of work for reentry on the side of the incarcerated person, but not necessarily for the family. Exactly. And it's like going from seeing him once every week to like being like, oh, why is there another person in the bathroom line? And like, why is like little things like that? You're like, oh, why is the peanut butter not where I put it? And it's like, what's going on? So we don't do enough of that. And I think if anything, that'd be my major like want to like prepare families where it's like, hey, like it's going to be different. Like you're going to have to like navigate certain things that you never even thought about before. But yeah, I think, yeah, like I said, looking back, I wish I would have gone ice skating or whatnot. know when this is all over, I'll take him ice skating.
Thank you, Saquon. That's a very good way of looking at it. And you're definitely right. There isn't enough preparation for the family members because it is different. It works, but it's definitely different. Liz, I want to go back to the COVID-19. So due to COVID-19, the visiting rooms in prisons were closed for many months, as Lorraine mentioned. And although they have reopened in some form or way, in a limited capacity, I guess I can say, prison relationships have been strained. How is Osborne helping to bridge this gap?
Not enough. We do have one, well, we have been able to arrange some calls where I mean, obviously the most important thing is to really have the connection, but the second most thing is to have some reason to have confidence that your loved one is safe. You know, the whole time, even though my husband and I were separated all those years, I never got a divorce because I was always terrified that if I was not married to him, they wouldn't feel any obligation to tell me if something happened. And so what we've tried to do is to make the kinds of calls when people call us and say, I just haven't heard anything, whatever, to try to track down Jermaine and some of you people where it was like, where is he? Why is this happening? The other thing is that we have video visiting, and we were able to get them to resume that. So we have places in our offices in Buffalo, Newburgh, Harlem, Brooklyn, and the Bronx, where if a family can get there, it's like a living room, and we're connected to 10 prisons, not all of them, but all 3 of the women's prisons. So, and then Clinton and Groveland and Green, which is terrible at arranging them, but that's that's an almost hour one that's allowed, and we've been trying to push it to expand it. We want to get a unit at Adirondack because we're especially worried about the fact that they put all these older men up in the middle of the goddamn tundra Adirondack, and it's completely inaccessible, and it's just for people over 60. So we've been trying. I mean, what Osborne's always tried to do is braid policy and practice, right? Like learn what we are doing so that, and sometimes it works. Like today, the deputy commissioner and commissioner felt compelled to send me an email saying we're closing Groveland visiting at 3 o'clock today. And how many things, because they know that we're connected to families and maybe we can reach people. And then I wrote back and said, but are you going to keep the video visiting open? And so that's really all we can do, is to try to stay connected to the department to make sure that we're getting the information, being able to turn it over. I don't think opening the family centers is the smartest thing in the world right now, because kids can't social distance to save themselves. And then we're also, advocating for vaccine and for more PPE. I wish we could do more. And anybody has any ideas, I'm not afraid to try anything.
Yeah, that's good. I see a few of the formerly incarcerated men saying a few things, but it's hard for me to focus on in response to your answer. All right, so the last question, and this question is for everyone, okay? So everybody that knows me, I'm always talking about changing the narrative of incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people and those who are impacted by their incarceration. What does the phrase changing the narrative represent to you in regards to incarceration? And if you can, particularly with prison visits? I'll start with you, Lorraine. Unmute. There you go.
For me, changing the narrative as it relates to incarceration would be that, all men aren't there to take advantage of the women that are supporting them. Families need to stay together and have the opportunity to have the father who wants to be involved more involved. So that would entail allowing a three-way call to a school system, you know, to discuss things about their children. It's not always about, you know, a negative impact, because if there is a family there and you see a history of the family visitation record and the children growing from infancy to adulthood, and they're now coming to see their father on their own, then there is a relationship there. So I would ask that not everyone is placed in a box, because there are tons of exceptions to the family dynamic, and that narrative needs to change. That, you know, men that may have committed crimes or accused of committing crimes 30 plus years ago, rehabilitation has taken place and they've grown from what they were to who they've become. I'd also change the narrative as it relates to your second part was the trailer visits.
I just said to visits, period. I would really love for you to talk about trailer visits, FRP.
Well, yeah, the trailer visits are very important because it gives the parents firsthand opportunity, the fathers specifically, and mothers, to speak to Jennifer's situation, an opportunity to be with the child one-on-one and to learn the child and the child learn them, as opposed to having restrictions in a visiting room. Those 48 hours means the world, because as I said, the matriarch versus the patriarch in our families, that time spent, you know, with their parents is important regardless of whatever role it plays. And it shouldn't be so difficult, you know, to have that family visit once you're in the system. You have a child, you have to go back to Albany and wait 90 days or so to add a child. It's like the process is just made to be more complicated than it should be, because the gist of it all is that you want to keep the unit together because it makes for a better inmate in your prison system, and you're also keeping your family unit together.
Okay, well said. Liz?
So I think changing the narrative starts with changing the language, because words matter, right? So like, we never say visitation, because I've never gone to visitate with my mother. I just visit her. Well, she's dead, but I used to visit her. And so I mean, there's a lot of words. And so I think that to change the public view of things, we have to think about how we speak about people in very human terms. And so when we're talking about who's in our classes, they're students and their fathers or their mothers at Albion, where we also teach. And so I think that's the beginning. I think we're 100% right that many people think, well, how is it going to be, how can you be a good father? And we always say, you know, you can be a bad citizen and a good parent. And you have to really nail that down. And one of the reasons I think we've been somewhat successful is that sitting on the governor's desk right now is a bill we've been working on for 10 years. Thank you, Taekwon. For proximity, that says that you should consider where people's children and families live when you decide which prison to put them in, which isn't even in the algorithm. And so that's a big deal, because in order to get that to the point we've gotten it now, it required the people in the legislature to consider that relationship that Lorraine described so well. And my heart breaks for Jennifer because of the importance of those relationships. To be able to see, oh, right, maybe that relationship matters. And also it relates in terms of the narrative to how people in the community will think about people coming home if they understood that there were families that cared about them, that they're going to be their neighbors. We're very excited. I almost can't, so excited. We just got funding to do this idea I've had for years, kinship reentry, where we could actually give money and support to families when someone comes home, so that more families would feel able, both financially and emotionally, to be able to handle that Looney Tunes people coming home and spending too long in the bathroom and putting their clothes under the bed and all the things that people do in reentry. We want to actually hire peers, and the peers would be women or men who've had a family member come home, to be able to have that connection so that we could tell you, you know, he's not crazy. That's just, you know, the impact on people. So I think there's a lot to do to begin to understand that families are valuable, and changing that narrative, starting with language and then ending with things like what you're doing right now, and the museum and the folks here, and Imani's place, and all of that is how we change it.
Thank you, Liz. Jen, changing the narrative, what does that mean to you when it comes to incarceration?
And visitation. So changing the narrative is humanizing the people that we're discussing, that we're talking about, that are experiencing this, that are living through this, and then realizing that they're people just like the rest of us. So a mom in prison is a mom that's got children. So it's important to think about what's going on with those children and how those children can stay connected to their mom and what the impact of that disconnect is. And also to remember that a lot of the reasons that a lot of the people are in prison now have to do with society and the way that they've lived and the way they've been forced to live. So yeah, they may have committed a crime, but the options were pretty slim. So we got to create more options.
Well said. Taekwon, changing the narrative when it comes to incarceration, if you have anything particular to say about visits, either one.
I think we have to look at, like Ms. Jennifer said, the idea that people commit crimes because out of necessity. I'm sorry, that's my laptop. It said it's 7 o'clock. People commit crimes out of necessity. So no one's going to do something if they didn't need to do it. So if you say someone robbed the store, why did they need to rob the store? They needed food. They needed money to do X, Y, and Z. We have to provide the opportunities at the state, city, and federal levels so that I can't say there won't be any crime, but there'll be fewer crimes. And looking at why people are doing what they're doing. And then I also want to point out, like Liz said, there's a bill, and officially I can't oppose or support legislation, but there is a bill on the governor's desk, and I would implore everyone to look into it and go with that where you will. But yes, there is a bill, trying to stay within my own ethics. But yes, go and look into that. But we have to look at crime holistically, and we can't just look at how to be as punitive as possible.
Okay. All right. Thank you all. I have a few questions from the audience. Let me see. Some of these we covered. Go ahead. Jen, you want to say something?
Yeah, along the lines of like humanizing the system. So now they're also realizing that a lot of people who are incarcerated were also victims. So I fell under that Domestic Violence Survivors Justice Act. So now the system is decided to take my life into consideration, my history and the mitigating circumstances. So it's just like we got to be conscious of where we're getting our ideas from and start to form better ones.
You some of you addressed this, but I think that this is a really good and important question. You can elaborate a little more if you did address it in some of your answers. The question is, what are the long-term economic consequences related to the incarceration of a family member? And what were there resources available to help when needed? And if not, what ideas do you have to meet that need? Economic consequences. We didn't discuss this. What are some economic consequences related to incarceration of a family member? Who wants to start here? Lorraine, you want to take this one? The obvious. Unmute.
Okay. The economic consequences, I mean, at what point?
The long-term economic consequences was the question.
I mean, long term, it really depends. That's a very broad question, because if you're someone who doesn't have the financial means, economically, you're not going to have a relationship, because it takes those finances to keep that family unit strong. However, if you're someone who's been blessed to have, you know, a good financial background, economically, you're providing and have to budget for one additional person. You know, everything I did on a monthly basis from a budgetary standpoint would include my visitation, his food packages, any clothing he may need. So long-term economically, it's just like you're living on one income. And a lot of things that you could have acquired had the two of you been home working collectively take a back seat. You know, but that's kind of, it depends upon the circumstance. So that's a very broad question.
Yeah. Anybody else want to take on this question? Go ahead, Jen.
So long term, I could speak for my daughter, and I would only disclose this now because she passed, but because I was incarcerated, my daughter experienced homelessness. She didn't have the right to refuse medication, but she didn't want to take Western medication. She believed in holistic healing and things like that. So eventually, whatever, she ended up taking the medication because I urged her, and like my mom urged her, because like my mother's home wasn't safe. So just so that she can get into a safe housing. Mm-hmm. And that medication, long story short, bad side effects, and my daughter's gone. So it's really, for a woman, a mother, my children, their father passed away in a motorcycle accident earlier on in my incarceration. So they really struggled. They didn't have any parents supporting them. So they were alone. My mom was, had a bad injury, so she's handicapped. So they were pretty much together alone. So it's really hard. And that's why it's not Imani's, it's Imani's safe house, because Imani never had a safe house. And had Imani had a safe house, she might've been here. For 17 and a half years, I couldn't provide her anything. But the love on my visits. But that couldn't keep her out of the streets and keep her safe.
I just want to say that there's also, she knew that you loved her, Jen.
Yeah. Yes, she did.
But long term, after people come home, one of the reasons we want to do this new program where we are able to have families get money is that it takes a minute to get a job. It takes a minute to be able to do that. And when they're coming home from prison, they may not be able to get exactly the same kind of job they would have gotten, either because age or a short resume. And, you know, on this call, I see we have a lot of our stars and they're doing great, but the majority of people, that record and the experience, we used to try to, when we would get people, we have workforce development jobs, and you know, when they teach you to work in prison, it's not exactly to shake hands, look people in the eye, take a lot of initiative. And so there's a lot of ways that all of those things translate into long-term economic consequences in terms of earning and in terms of confidence. So there's a lot of costs, but I mean, Lorraine pointed to the ones that happen when people are in and having to take over supporting families, but it takes a hit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It really does take a hit. I know for me personally, it's like it set us back almost a generation, you know, and it makes me emotional because if it wasn't for Lawrence being incarcerated, we could have had so much more for our children, you know what I mean? So, and then the economic effects leaks into everything else. It leaks into everything else. The social, emotional dynamic of how your children are growing up. You know, it's like you have to put so much extra into everything that you're doing daily with your family to be where you feel you need to be.
Yeah.
How can we bring, one last question, the questions are coming. How can we bring more awareness to these issues or give support? Anybody can take that. Taekwon, you want to take it?
Oh.
I didn't hear from you. And then you can go after him.
I'm a huge supporter of Sesame Street. Well, Sesame Workshop, and I see Tanya's in the chat. It's been one of my goals to meet Elmo, so I'm kind of jealous. But I think that like Sesame Workshop does a great job of demystifying like quote unquote taboo issues, and definitely like meeting people where they are. Like incarceration is a hard topic for adults to talk about, let alone children, where it's like you don't necessarily have the words to say like my dad is incarcerated or like, and this is why many parents will say like, oh, daddy's in school, or daddy's away, or daddy's so-and-so. My mom, I don't know if it was a blessing or a curse, was a lot more honest and upfront, where it was like, daddy's in prison. I don't know if that was a blessing or a curse, but having programs like the Sesame Workshop and other programs like Osborne and like Children of Promise in Brooklyn, those are great programs that like you have like other people in the room to see that it's not such a taboo thing where like you can develop friendships and build community.
Okay.
You know, the reality is that a report from forward.us says that 1 out of every 2 adults in the United States has had the experience of an immediate family member being incarcerated from a day to 50 years. And if people would speak up and say, which for years, I never shared publicly my experience. And then you realize when I listen to you all and the stories, and when we finally come out and say, and people go, really, you? That's how you change it, is for people to realize that they're already living next door to someone who's been incarcerated. They're already going to school with someone who has the same experience. Our folks that would go into classrooms, they would ask at the beginning of the class, who has ever known anybody who's been incarcerated? And the kids, you know, it's like nobody. And then after that person shares that they had been incarcerated or were a child of an incarcerated parent, and they ask the same question at the end of this time, say, by the way, have any of you ever experienced anyone you know going to prison? You know, and then 2/3 of the hands go up. That permission only comes from any of us that are willing to share our experience and giving permission to others to do so.
Can I add to that, please?
Of course.
I think that where we're forthcoming and very honest, and we share that, you know, we have our loved ones incarcerated. I believe that it would be such an enormous lesson and it would have a great impact on officers at every facility to have a mandatory continuing education class to teach them how to deal with the loved ones of these men that are incarcerated, but also find out how many of their loved ones are incarcerated, so they can then start to humanize the people that they deal with.
Good one. Jen, do you want to add anything else? You have the final word if you want it.
So I agree with visibility, because like Liz said, we're already here. Like you, your neighbor, your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister have been incarcerated. So it's real. We all know what's happening, but it's a secret. So visibility and like what you're doing, countering that narrative, not countering what they put on us, and now opening up and allowing us to have our narrative, speak our narrative.
With that, I'd like to really, really thank you all for showing up here today. This is just the beginning of the types of justice talks that the Sing Sing Prison Museum will bring. Brent is going to close. However, I want to ask Victoria, if you can please play the pictures at the end when Brent finishes to close out, because I don't think a lot of people got to see those. And I want Jen to see. She didn't get a chance to see. Thank you, Brent. It's on you.
Well, thank you, Roneen. This was just an extraordinary program, and I don't think I can really add anything except the comments about visibility is very important to the Sing Sing Prison Museum. We feel we're pulling the curtain back not only on 200 years of history that I think people really don't know, but also pulling the curtain back on the conditions today in our criminal justice system and how we can reimagine that system. And so, Roneen, you put together a brilliant panel. I really can't add anything. I would just encourage everyone who's watching this panel, if you have ideas for future additions in our Justice Talks series, please send them to us. And look at our website, singsingprisonmuseum.org. Thank you and good night.